Hello, as you can see, I've created a spreadsheet model for the school trip scenario. On my top row, I've got the price of John's buses per student and the standard fee. Underneath, I've got Barry's buses and the cost per student or teacher, followed by the standard fee. All of this information was gathered through the information worksheet that I had for the school trip scenario. What I now need to do is I now need to write out some formulas to work out how much it'll cost for John's buses per student and how much it's going to cost for Barry's buses per student. This is a very simple formula. To do John's buses, all I'm going to type in here is equals, and then I'm going to click on cell B1 to get the per student. Now what I need to do is I need to times that by the number of students. So to do the times, it's shift and the number 8 key, so it looks like a little asterisk. Then I'm going to click on cell A5, which will basically say 100, which is in cell B1, times by 1, which is inside cell A5. But that's not it. What I then need to do is I need to add the standard fee, which is in cell E1. So we've already learned about formulas and why we use formulas. And this is the first formula that we need to use to figure out the price for John's buses. I then press enter. And you can see for one student to go on John's buses, it's a total of 400 dirhams. Now what we've learned previously is that if we click on this formula, or click on this cell containing the formula, what we should be able to do is copy those formulas down using the fill handle. However, let's see what happens when I do that. You can see that I've got quite a lot of errors, and there's a very clear and easy to understand reason for that. If you remember, the idea about relative referencing in using the fill handle is that the spreadsheet is trying to be clever. What it does is it looks at your formula, and because I'm dragging the fill handle down, it thinks that any number that it sees in that formula, which relates to a row, it thinks that it needs to change that by 1, because I'm dragging the fill handle down. So when I drag the fill handle down in the following row, it thinks that this formula needs to be B2, then A6, then E2. Just to prove to you what I mean, if I go down one row, you can see that the spreadsheet has cleverly tried to think, well, because you're dragging the fill handle down, I need to change this number to a 2, this one to a 6, and this one to a 2. So on the next row, it changes them to 3s, the next row, it changes them to 4s, etc, etc, etc. So you can see that this number, and this number are going up by 1 each time, because that's what relative referencing is. But obviously there's a problem with that, because what that means is, for example, when I go to this cell, it thinks, if I double click, it thinks that I want to get this number here and times it by this number. Now I do want it to times it by this number, but that is not the number I want to times. I want B1, so I never want this number to change. No matter what cell I'm in John's buses, I want it to always refer to cell B1, not B2, not B3, etc. And the same goes for this number here, because what it's doing is it's getting Barry's prices when I want John's prices. Again, if I go down another row and I go inside here, this time again, look, it's got this cell, B3, timesing it by A7, which is correct, but then it's adding E3. So what I want to do is I want to freeze these numbers, or should I say these cells. So go back to this one. I want to freeze B1, so I always want to use cell B1, and I always want to use cell E1. But I do want this number to change, because as I move down, I need it to times it by this number here. Yeah, so this one I do want to change, these ones I don't. Now to do that, it's very easy. All you need to do is click on the cell where you write the very first formula. And what I want to do is I want to freeze B1. To do that, select B1 and then press F4 on your keyboard. What that will do is it will put a $sign before the B and a $sign before the 1. This means freeze the column. So always keep this column the same. And this means freeze the row, which means always keep the row the same. I don't want to do the same for E1. So select E1, press F4, and again put the dollar signs in. Now what I've got is it says B1 times A5 plus E1, which means that this number will change when I drag the fill handle, but these will not. Okay, so let's watch. So again, I've got my formula with the absolute cell referencing in it. I get my fill handle, I drag it down. Oops, this one there. And now it's looking good. Let's see what that's done. So if I go to my next row, it's kept B1, it's changed this to A6, and it's kept E1. Next one, it's kept B1, it's changed this to A7, and it put that and kept it at E1. Again, B1 is the same, A9, E1, and so on. Here, B1, A10, E1. Here, B1, A11, E1. If I just double click inside here, look, you can see it's referencing this cell, it's changing this one relatively, and then referencing this cell. So that is absolute cell referencing. And then what I need to do is I also need to do the same for Barry's buses. So equals this number times by this number plus this number. Okay, press enter, and again, if I drag this down, it will use relative referencing. So what I actually want to do is change this formula, lock these cells by using absolute cell referencing, pressing F4, and this one needs to stay the same, so absolute cell referencing F4. Now the formula is correct, I can click on it and drag the fill handle down. Fantastic, let's just see if that's worked. If I just randomly click on one of these cells, double click, you can see it kept this cell reference the same, it's changed this one, and it's kept this one the same as well, which is what I told it to do. Okay, so that is absolute cell referencing. What you then need to do is you then need to create a graph here. Now the graph should show the difference between John's prices and Barry's prices. So to do that, I get John's and Barry's headings, drag and select all of the data, the values that I want, and then I want to insert, I'm going to do a line graph. I'm going to choose this one. I'm going to put that graph in here. Like that, and again, that's a nice little graph, but it's not brilliant because it's not getting a title, an x-axis, a y-axis. So in the design tab at the top, let's just choose one that's more appropriate. Maybe something like this. Yep, I like that. And you can see here, look, what this graph is showing, that when it gets to 15 students, the prices are exactly the same. Yeah, so 15 students, the prices are exactly the same. But as soon as we go past 15 students, you can clearly see that John's buses become the cheaper option. So initially, John's buses are quite high in price compared to Barry's. Yeah, but as soon as I get to 15 students, it turns. John's buses then become cheaper. And the reason for that is because Barry's buses are actually charging more money per student or teacher than John's. The reason John's are so high to start with is because there's a standard fee of 300 dirhams. But as you get more students, obviously this price overtakes this one, with this one combined. So it's a really nice way to actually represent that information in this graph. Again, I'd want to add a title, so I'd need an appropriate title here, an appropriate y-axis label, an appropriate x-axis label. Again, just to keep this simple, this is the number of students on staff. Oh, teacher, should I say? Oops. And this is cost. I can change the font size of these if I want to. And the title should be "This graph shows the difference in sizes between Barry's buses depend on the students, staff that attend. Okay. Yeah, I'm happy with that. Then what I need to do is I need to answer these questions. So I won't fill those in for you, I'll let you answer those. To answer this question, you're going to have to change some of these values. So to find out what would happen if Barry's buses increase their prices to 130, we go to Barry's, change this to 130, and look how that affects your graph. Then write in here what you're seeing. Again, with this one, it says if John's buses reduce the standard fee to 100, and Barry's buses kept his prices at 120, how will that affect the prices? And again, you can comment on that by looking at your graph. So you can see in that short video, we've talked about absolute cell referencing, we've figured out how to create a graph, and then we can use that graph to answer these questions. Okay.